The night she pounded on my cabin door like she owned the forest, something old and quiet in me stood up. It was 2:13 a.m., that kind of mountain dark where your eyes remember shapes more than they see them. The stove ticked as the last oak log settled. My father's wool blanket faded red, still carrying a hint of cedar and coffee, was tucked around my legs. I'd left the porch light low, the way he always did, for company you don't expect. Then came the second knock. Flat-palmed, angry. Open up. HOA compliance. Identify yourself. Her voice had that bright, brittle edge that makes dogs go silent. I swung my feet to the floorboards and felt the cold bite my arches. A flashlight slid across the window panes. Gravel crunched. Another beam. A radio crackled. The little generator hummed steady behind the woodshed she'd already called security. I cracked the door. Cold air rushed in. On my porch stood a woman in a stop sign red quilted vest, clipboard held like a shield. Behind her, a young guy in a tucked polo with a plastic badgeless side oak security. On the gravel, a pickup idled, headlights bleaching the birch trees pale. Name, she demanded before hello. You're in violation of Covenant 6C, no overnight occupancy without HOA approval. This structure is non-conforming. You cannot sleep here. I'm sleeping in my own cabin, I said. Been doing it since before your board had a logo. She squinted past me like the hearth's glow proved a crime. Short-term rental activity suspected. We've had reports of visitors. I thought of my visitors. My mother's photo in a red scarf. My father's hat on the peg by the door. The coffee mug he gave me at 16, graved with my initials, and the day we rebuilt this porch. Visitors enough, ma'am, the security kid murmured, softer. Maybe we just need to verify the owner. That's what we're doing, she snapped. Lifting her phone, Android there on my porch dialed 911. Yes, I need a deputy. Trespasser in a non-compliant structure. Possible vagrant. Yes, I feel threatened. I looked past her to the lake. November wind-shaved ripples off the surface. The old oak my father split with lightning in '92 raised a black arm to the sky. I could hear Dad in that quiet, "Don't shout. Stand where you're supposed to stand." I stepped onto the porch, barefoot on the cold boards, and pulled the door close to keep the heat in. "I'll wait with you," I said. "We'll talk when the deputy arrives." "Fine." She clicked her pen like a metronome and started photographing Eve's chimney cap. In the hand-carved beam over the door where Dad chiseled the year he set the foundation, 1978. Anger rose hot and quick, then settled heavier. This cabin was our winter backbone. My father framed it after shifts at the mill. I learned to read by the light of that stove. When Mom got sick, this is where we listened to the truth without machines. After we buried her, Dad and I replaced the roof together, handing up shingles and breath and the simple yes of work. Nothing up here had ever been borrowed, much less stolen. Headlights stitched through the trees and turned my drive into a ribbon of frost. The county SUV rolled to a stop. The deputy climbed out, shoulders hunched against the cold, hand easy near his belt. He took in the scene, the clipboard queen. The kid who wished he were anywhere else? Me, barefoot, holding my calm like a bucket you don't want to spill. "Evening," he said. "Who called?" "I did," she said, stepping forward. "HOA president. We have a trespasser in violation of occupancy rules, using a structure without permits." He refused to identify himself. "I feel unsafe." The deputy's eyes moved to me. His radio whispered. For half a second, a smile tugged at his mouth like he'd found a friend in a crowd he didn't expect. "Sir," he said, "neutral, but warmer. You've got ID?" "Inside, on the mantel." I paused at the door. "With your permission, deputy." He nodded. "That's fine." Stepped in, grabbed my wallet, handed over my driver's license with the same hand that sworn oaths beneath portraits of men in black robes. He glanced down, then a prilly up this time. "Judge Mason," he said, surprised into a half laugh. "Apologies, sir. Didn't recognize you without a tie." Everything went still. The flashlight lowered. The security kid's mouth fell open like a student, hearing the answer out loud. The woman in red froze, eyes measuring not distance anymore but choices. I didn't enjoy it. I let it pass like a cold breath. Tonight I'm just a homeowner, I said quietly. Let's handle this like neighbors. I don't care if you're the governor, she snapped. Our covenants were recorded in 2004, I finished, gentler than she deserved. This cabin was built in 78. It's grandfathered. The county has letters on file affirming non-conforming use. There's an easement older than your bylaws. No short-term rental. No guests. Just me and the stove. The deputy cleared his throat. Not taking sides, taking temperature. Ma'am, I can't enforce HOA rules. If there's no criminal trespass, this is civil. She regrouped behind her clipboard. I'll be issuing fines. Daily penalties. Board hearing. We won't tolerate lawlessness. I thought about explaining how law works and how it doesn't. I heard Dad again. Don't perform. Don't collapse. Set the table and invite the truth to sit down. Let's do this right, I said. Tomorrow, daylight. I'll bring the original deed permits and the county letters. We'll meet at your clubhouse. Bring your board. Deputy, you're welcome to observe, she shifted. The red vest looked louder than she did. Fine. 10A.M. She stalked to her car, tossed the clipboard, and left with her lights doing the most. The security kid mumbled sorry and followed. The deputy lingered a moment as the night stitched itself back together. Everything okay for the night, Judge? Will be, I said. Tell dispatch not to worry. No vagrants here, he grinned. Could have fooled me with those bare feet. His two-fingertip, gone. I stood long enough to let my toes go numb and my anger go useful. Inside, I set water to boil, pulled Dad's old coffee tin, and laid out papers on the table. Deed, surveys. The county's non-conforming use letter and the one thing they never expect, patience. The stove crackled. An owl stitched the dark to the trees with a sound older than any covenant. I slept like a man who knows the ground under him by the name his father gave it. Before sleep, one truth settled. Tomorrow wasn't about fines or rules. It was about reminding a noisy world that some homes don't need permission to keep standing. I woke in the hush that lives between the last star and the first bird. Coffee bloomed in Dad's dented percolator. Frost webbed the grass. The lake wore pewter until the sun decided on a color. I set the table like laying out tools, deed book, survey, printed covenants with my notes. Beside them, the zoning letter, old paper, real seal. Ink with the tired confidence of bureaucracy, non-conforming use acknowledged. Structure predates protective covenants. Owner occupancy permitted, on top. I placed a black and white from 79 Dad leaning on a sawhorse, grinned big enough to see the nail between his teeth. Behind him, the cabin half framed. This porch still bones. Proof doesn't just live in paper. It lives in what you can point to. By 7, I drove to town. The feed store owner waved. The kid at the diner knew my order. On a bulletin board, a flyer for the HOA chili cook-off, clip heart leaves, and exclamation points trying too hard. This county moves slow on purpose. That's why people run here when the world shouts. That's why a woman like last night's president has to shout to hear herself at the courthouse, not as judge. Just a man who knows where the good copier is. I stopped by zoning. Larry looked up from his biscuit. Mornin', Mason. What brings you in? Need fresh copies of the non-conforming letter for Lakeside Oaks. Board's got questions. He wiped his fingers. Pulled a file like a magician. Lakeside Oaks. Pre-HOA cabin. He thumped the letter down and stamped today's date. Tell him Larry says hi. Won't be the messenger, I said, and we both laughed. Not mean, just tired of the same show. Back at the cabin, I did what most folks forget. I read their rules. Line by line. Eyes on words, not drama. Covenants 6C and 8A. ARC guidelines. Enforcement procedures. Buried in boilerplate was the thing I needed, not a loophole, a spine, due process. Notice opportunity to be heard. And a quiet sentence, the association shall not enforce any rule to the detriment of a lot owner whose property use predates adoption so long as such use is lawful. That line is the difference between a neighborhood and a fiefdom. Then I checked my footing. I called my clerk. Any conflicts for me today? Not unless you count casserole diplomacy, she said. HOA matter. I'm an owner. If anything lands in our lap, assign it to Judge Ellis. Understood. Clean. No questions I shouldn't answer. By 8:30, I had one more piece. A voicemail from Walter Tired Electrician, hands like good pliers. Heard they're poking at you. Keep your head. Folks are tired of being bossed. I've seen that tired. A man wanting to fly the flag his father's buried under, without measuring it against a ladder. A widow planting tomatoes by memory, not permit. A boy fishing at dawn without a laminated pass bouncing on his chest. We make rules to keep peace. Some use rules to pick fights. At 10 sharp, I parked under a sign that barked HOA parking only like asphalt could join a club. The clubhouse looked like every clubhouse built this century. Fake stone, big porch, new carpet pretending to be old lodge. Through the glass, the board sat behind a long table with pitchers of water and microphones, tiny legislature. Big posture. Red vest at the center. 2 board members flanking her. A few residents in folding chairs, half curious, half braced. The security kid hugged the back wall. I walked in without hurry. No robe, no gavel. Flannel, clean jeans, boots that have been on roofs, and beside hospital beds. I set my folder on the lectern and reminded myself, this isn't court. It's a clubhouse. Don't perform. Invite truth. She started first. We'll begin, she announced into the PA. Hearing on the violation at Lot 7, non-compliant. Structure and unauthorized overnight occupancy. Sir, state your name for the record. Daniel Mason, I said. Owner of Lot 7, lifelong county resident. This cabin was built by my father and me. I'm here to correct your record and if we're lucky your course. A few heads turned at the last name. It happens. I don't use it like a hammer. I use it like a plumb bob the weight that shows what's straight. Mr. Mason, she said, we have reports you're using this structure without approval and possibly conducting short-term rentals. Who reported that? I asked, not to trap, just to invite sunlight. A concerned neighbor. Which one? We don't disclose complainants. You did last night, I said softly. The room shifted. People remembered 2 a.m. sirens coloring their bedroom walls. I kept my voice slow and clean. The way Dad taught me to sharpen a chisel. Foundation first. Your covenants were recorded in 2004. Our foundation was poured in 1978. The county acknowledged our non-conforming. USI held up Larry's letter and reaffirmed it. I am not renting. I don't need your permission to sleep in a home that stood before your bylaws existed. I slid copies to the board. The woman on the left reading glasses, teenager tested, patient studied the seal. The man on the right traced my margin notes, eyebrows up like homework arrived. Red vest kept her chin high, but her pen stopped moving. Second, I said, your own declarations include a savings clause protecting owners whose lawful use predates your rules. That's not a loophole. That's respect. It keeps you from turning neighbors into violators for living the lives they built before you printed a binder. A low murmur moved the room. People who'd felt respect go missing suddenly recognized its shape. And third, I said, calling 911 on a homeowner sleeping in his own bed is reckless. Our deputies have better calls at that hour than HOA drama. Your lucky last night ended with a chuckle. It could have ended with a tragedy. We all know it. The deputy from last night slipped into the back as if he'd been waiting on that line. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He existed like a fact. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I finished. I'm here to live in peace and ask you to remember why you exist. To serve, not to star in a show. Withdraw the violation. Reaffirm the clause. And let's write a better After Dark process. We can do it right now, like neighbors who remember each other's names. The patient board member adjusted her glasses and looked at Red Vest. Something passed between them. That's when I knew the day might bend toward quiet justice, if we let it. The room held a long breath, the kind that decides whether a conversation becomes a fight or a future. We'll take questions, Red Vest said, less certain now. Power is loud until it has to listen. Walt raised his hand from the third row. He stood like a man stands for bread in church. Walter Briggs. Been here 21 years. I remember when Mr. Mason's daddy replaced the roof, brought him a hammer when he dropped his. We all knew that cabin was grandfathered before any of us knew what grandfathered meant. Ain't right to treat folks like strangers on their own land. A wind-through-wheat murmur moved the chairs. Not applause-permission. A daycare owner stood next. Last summer, your office told me my swing set was too tall, she said to Red Vest. Made me cry on my own porch. Then it turned out the rule didn't even apply to backyards. I never got an apology. I'd like one. The patient board member her tag said. Gloria leaned in. We need to pause, she said, steady. We've been enforcing without enough regard for pre-existing uses and without enough grace. Mr. Mason has provided documentation. Council can verify, but I see no cause to continue this violation. Red Vest stiffened. If we let one person slide, they'll all know one is sliding, Gloria said gently. We're standing up straight, the deputy cleared his throat. Not our place to weigh in on covenants, he said. But 911 is for emergencies. Midnight HOA checks, aren't it? Please don't cry wolf. Red Vest flushed to match her vest. The room had reskulled, and she looked smaller. She reached for the last defense. We have a duty to protect property values. Nothing raises property values like not waking the sheriff at 2 a.m. I set my father's photo where all could see. Property values are fine, I said. But this, I tapped the picture, is what gives a place value. A son remembering pine tar on his father's hands. A widow planting tomatoes because she can taste July. A neighbor lending a hammer. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Gloria spoke into the mic. I move we withdraw the violation against Mr. Mason. Record the non-conforming status of Lot 7 in our files. And adopt a policy that complaints after 9 p.m. require either a visible emergency or concurrence from a second board member before action. I further move we create a heritage use register voluntary, no fees. So owners whose uses predate our covenants can file paperwork once and not be harassed again. The man beside her looked relieved. Second, all in favor. Hands rose. All but one opposed. One hand lifted, hovered, then drifted down like a leaf that realized the wind wasn't with it. Motion carries, Gloria said. Red Vest turned to me. For a moment, I saw not a villain, but a person whose fear had been louder than her sense. Mr. Mason, she said off mic. Overstepped. He did, I said. Not cruel. But it's over if you let it be. Start fresh. She nodded. We'll send confirmation. Coffee's better, I said. She almost smiled, then caught herself, as if mercy were a violation too. The meeting adjourned. We did what neighbors do. We talked in the parking lot longer than the meeting itself. Walt clapped my shoulder. The daycare owner asked about Shidamatos. The security kid came over, hat in his hands. Sir, I didn't want to be there last night. I'm just trying to pay for school. Showed up polite, I said. Learn the difference between serving and bossing. You'll be fine, the deputy lingered. Judgy said that was something. Just a homeowner today, I said. Maybe that's what we needed, he grinned. Also shoes next time, we laughed. and the cold morning warmed one shade. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting mountain air wash out the clubhouse smell. Turning down my gravel, the lake threw back a ribbon of silver. I walked the ridge trail my father loved. Dry leaves made that papery sound under my boots. From the high point, I could see the cabin roof, the crooked seam where we overlapped shingles the summer. We argued about everything except the roof on the porch. I set the board-stamped confirmation beside Larry's letter. Paper had done its job. Now wood and wind could do theirs. I poured coffee into Dad's mug and sat on the top step. A red-tailed hawk rode a thermal above the oaks. Somewhere downshore, a steady hammer found its pace. I thought about last night lights and voices thrown like stones, and about this morning hands raised in a room, choosing to be a community again. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a repair. Here's the truth older folks know. Rules won't save you, and freedom won't either. People do. The ones who wave you in traffic, bring soup when your wife's sick, tell you your dog's loose without threatening a fine. In small towns, law and kindness are cousins. Live here long enough and you learn to speak both, I said. Dad's photo back on the mantel and let the kettle sing. The cabin breathed like a living thing would settling. Stove ticking, winter pressing a cold hand to the window and finding the glass warm. The world outside could keep screaming. Up here we keep the porch light low and the welcome wide. Before the day slipped away, I wrote the board a note not as a judge. As Daniel from Lot 7, I offered to help draft clearer processes, to host a heritage morning where old-timers could bring their paperwork and stories, and newcomers could hear who built the trails before they were amenities. I even wrote a line to the president, her name is Marlowe, thanking her for agreeing to a better way. I addressed it by hand. In a place like this, handwriting is a bridge. By late afternoon, the lake smoothed out. A boy in a red coat cast a line from the public dock, hopeful the way boys are when water and time meet. I raised my mug from the porch. He didn't see me. That was fine. Some blessings land best when they land soft. When the sun slipped behind the ridge, I clicked on the porch light the way my father taught Milo, steady, for company you don't expect. I thought of who might need it, a deputy on the late shift, a neighbor with a question, or a president learning how to be a neighbor first. The lake was calm again, and for the first time in a long while, so was I. Standing up for what's right isn't about winning arguments. It's about reminding each other what kind of place we promise to build. You can't enforce your way to community. You can only neighbor your way there. Ever have an HOA call go sideways, Aura? A neighbor finally remember your name? Share it in the comments. I read every one. If you believe some fights are worth having and worth finishing with grace, hit subscribe. Let's keep a porch light on for each other.